the things that have happened during this World Cup, with a main focus on the African teams. Sadly, Morocco were unable to progress after losing 2-0 to France. France will now face Argentina in the final. So we're going to talk about this today. I would like to hear your take, okay, how you felt. Whether you're Moroccan or non-Moroccan, it would be good to hear your take. Interestingly, right, so soon we'll play a clip. I had the opportunity to go down Edgware Road to speak to Moroccans who were very upbeat about this particular game. But what happened, in as much as Morocco lost, there was a lot to be jubilant about. There was one guy that I wanted to speak to who refused to talk to us simply because he was so emotional. And it showed how much this game actually meant to Morocco. To some people, it was more than just football. Some have said that particularly when it comes to football and Western media or the West in general, they look down on Africa. They look down on Arabs. The misconception about Arabs or Africans as a whole. The way Morocco played is a testament to all Africans, and as Moroccans would say themselves, to the entire Arab nation. One thing for sure was that there has been a massive shift when it comes to Africans playing at the top level. Yes, we do have these, and we are capable of playing at the top flight with the best team in the world. So very soon we'll bring you an update as to how Moroccans felt when we watched the team playing against the defending champions, France. Also, here in the UK, nurses are decided to go on strike. Why? Because the government is not looking to pay them the money that they are asking for. Nurses are saying that their salary has stagnated while inflation has risen. And now started to the streets of London to protest. I was there to speak to some of them, and they shared their opinions. So that will be coming up very soon as well. And as always, I encourage you to get on board. Let's have a discussion. The show is designed to have a dialogue. It's not a monologue. In as much as I talk a lot, it is not a monologue. It's a dialogue. So your contributions are welcome. In fact, your contribution is very important to the show because it's good to hear your take. And this is why this show was created. A platform that you and I, myself and the guest, and you, we can have a discussion to talk about what is happening. I've been told that we have the clip ready. Nurses going on strike. Okay. If the clip is not ready, guys, when it's ready, do let me know, and we can play it. Now back to football. Elsewhere in Ghana, and this is interesting. So the GFA, Ghana Football Association, are now saying that anyone who would say anything negative which is unfounded without any evidence, they're looking to take such a person into the courts. Yes, according to the Black Stars, people are using the image or abusing the image of the Black Stars. Okay, not according to the Black Stars, according to the GFA. People are abusing the image of the Black Stars. Some have gone as far as saying that the Ghana Football Association president, Kurt Okraku, is actually using the Black Stars as an agency for to facilitate his players into the limelight. How truthful is this? If you're known to the Ghana football circles, one particular broadcaster, he goes by the name of Fireman Zongo. He's been very critical of the Black Stars, not just today, but for a very, very long time. And according to him, he's been vindicated. He said so many things with regards to the Black Stars as to why people think his utterances are a hindrance to the progression of the Black Stars. Now, I have my own 2 pence about this thing. 1, because I'm a Ghanaian. 2, I love football. 3, I'm all about giving you both sides of the argument. What I would say, right, and I know Ghana did not proceed beyond the group stages, okay? What I would say was that there was no high expectations for the Black Stars. None whatsoever. If you recall, during the AFCON in Cameroon, Ghana failed to make it beyond the group stages. So how on earth do you expect the Black Stars to go all the way to even win the World Cup? Yes, to beat South Korea, that was good, but in its totality, there was no way the Black Stars would be able to progress, simply because they're just not that, I wouldn't say good enough. They are good enough. Their talent is there, but they haven't played together for that long. So their cohesion is not there yet. Not to say it will not happen, but it's not there yet. One thing I took away from this entire World Cup, dealing with Ghana, is that the future is bright. Every player that participated at this year's World Cup shows that there is something positive to come out of the Black Stars in the coming years. So I wouldn't worry too much. Now, with regards to the coach, Otto Addo, some have criticized his decision to actually announcing to the general public that he's resigning from his position. Now, whether that is wrong or right is debatable, but one thing he said, which I do agree with him, is that many Ghanaians were aware that come the end of the World Cup, he'll bid his farewell to Ghanaians. And I think we should give him credit, because this current group of players, they're not the finished article yet. So I think Coach Addo, from my perspective, I think we need to say a big well done to him. It's not easy being in the firing line, especially as the Black Stars coach. A lot of people have come and gone. He came into it right into the mix where the Black Stars, which I keep referring to as going through a transitional period. And as such, I think he's done well. A, the abysmal performance from the Black Stars during the AFCON, and B, able to qualify for the World Cup. However they qualified for the World Cup, they made it there to Qatar 2022. Some teams did not make it. Nigeria, the Super Eagles, they did not make it, but the Black Stars did. So there's a lot of good things to come out of Ghana. Let me hear your take on the GFA's stance. The fact that anyone trying to disregard the GFA or say things about the GFA unfounded without any evidence, they're looking to take such a person to court. Is this against the freedom of expression? Let me hear your take. On the other side, I understand the position of the GFA, because I remember the GFA were embroiled in quote-unquote corruption, which led to the resignation of the former GFA president, Kwesi Nyantakyi. So, of course, they would take every measures to make sure that the brand GFA or the Black Stars does not get, dragged through the mud. So I understand their position. But at the same time, I think it's a bit too far to say anybody who says anything unsubstantiated, you take such a person to the courts. Why? Okay. All right. Looks as if we have the clips ready. As I did make mention earlier.
Unbelievably.
And, spoke to a few people.
Unbelievably impressed by this Moroccan team. I know lots of people rated them going into the semi-final, but I don't think they were given enough credit for their technical skills. They're one of the best football sides I've ever seen. They've got players I've never heard of pinning it in the bottom corner from 30 yards, and they've been mightily unfortunate not to end up World Cup finalists after tonight. I felt it on Saturday night, and I feel it again tonight. If France bought one lottery ticket, they would win the Euro Millions. That is the level of luck that this football team have.
Team is like a family, and what we're working on is make the fans, Moroccan people, African people, all Arabs very happy. So they're fighting to win the game, and they're working very hard to get what they are now at that level. To get to enter the semi-final was the first time in history of like Arab and African country.
We are so proud of our team. The first 15 minutes was very hard. We got a goal in the first 15 minutes, which makes the game very difficult especially against a team which won the last World Cup. But we were so proud of our team. We're so proud of this achievement, and we made history in this World Cup, this special World Cup, which was organized in an Arabic country for the first time. And hopefully, we keep going, and for the next achievements, especially the African Cup. And now we're proud of our team, and we're giving Africa the chance to participate in the next World Cup with 11 teams instead of 5. What I can say is congratulations to all Moroccans, and we're gonna be always behind them. The last 3 years was difficult for all Moroccans, especially with the coach from Bosnia. It was a terrible one. He made troubles and problems with all the best players of the Moroccan team. But what can I say is now we have a national manager, and we're gonna support him. He showed himself in this tournament, and he's very competent. And we see him the best one for our national team, and hopefully they're gonna stay with the Moroccan team for years and years and years.
I was really hoping Morocco would win. I was strongly supporting Morocco. France has already won. Morocco is the first African country to enter the semi-final. I really hoped that they would enter the finals. But yeah, it's just disappointment. They played really well though. So, I mean, it's sad, but it's okay. Hopefully next year more African and other representative countries would come over.
Today we made history. We already made it. So like, it's a loss, of course, but we are still happy for our team. We are still happy for African and Arab football. So we still have a game to play Saturday, and we hope we're gonna win it. And we gave like all this team, and Walid Regragui, the coach, gave hope to all the Arab and African community for the next World Cup. We showed that African football is at the level, and we won Portugal, we won Spain, we won Belgium. Like we showed that we can play against top 10 world best teams in the world. So like for us it's a victory, and we hope that like in the next World Cup we will make it again. Like why not win it, inshallah. And Dima Maghreb!
Them, in my opinion, the best on the day. But with
Yeah.
they were able to just
Many times. So I went out to speak to people to get reactions, right? And the guy actually know how good Morocco to play the Euro Millions right about now because they're gonna win. Morocco were that good.
some of the players, a lot of teams now.
And that leads me to my other question. The Moroccan boss says that European clubs think Arabs and Africans are ignorant in football. And we're our guest, our viewers rather, is he right? Has he got a point, do you think?
So African,
I mean, look, let's say though about the win. They dedicated their African and Arabs to the point where people are saying, hey, these guys do not see themselves as African. I don't think so. I want to know if and as well.
I mean, I'm personally on the view as Africans, we need to stand united. This World Cup has shown us that every African nation was behind Morocco. So it's a message that we can send to the politicians, to the whole nations of Africa, that Africa is one. We need to stand united. It's not about sending a positive message as united.
Do you think Morocco have more or less redefined what it is to be an African? You think?
I think so, yes.
In what sense? In what way?
In a way that they played as one. We are what we will be.
Okay. Now it'd be good to hear your take as well. Join the conversation. We're streaming live on Facebook. So do join the conversation. You can share your comments, put your comments on there, and I will read them out. If you have any questions for the guests, let me know, and I will read them out. I'll put it to my guests. Well, I keep saying this, right? This is not a monologue. It's a dialogue. Let's talk. Let's hear you. Let's hear your take on what is happening. Did Morocco go beyond your expectations? Um, Earlier, I was saying this that there was one particular guy that I wanted to talk to, but this guy was he was overwhelmed, filled with emotions that he actually did not want to talk to me. And to my surprise, okay, as an outsider looking in, I'm thinking, look, semifinals is just fantastic. It's the biggest achievement yet that any African country has been able to get to this position. But I think somewhere deep down, I understand the logic. You got to be in it to win it, right? But it looks as if Moroccans actually believed that they could beat France. I mean, come on, this is France we're talking about. With no respect, no disrespect to Morocco.
I mean, it's only right that for them to feel that way because as an athlete, as a coach, I mean, when you reach to that certain position, you always challenge the player to believe that they can actually go beyond. Because the moment they got to the quarterfinals, when they won the game, they believed that they could go on to the semifinals to win the game. And why not possibly also to push themselves to get into the finals?
The last time we spoke about Morocco, and I was here, and I was saying to you that when it comes to especially African teams compared to their European counterparts, what is missing seems to be that quality. And I asked you, saying that, do you think Morocco lacks that quality, or you think that quality is there? And I think I probably might end up calling you the prophet now because it looks as if the quality is there. But in all fairness, what do you think was missing from Morocco, aside from the fact that they couldn't score?
No, absolutely. That's a good question. I think what was missing was experience. Moroccans players didn't really have that much experience compared to the French players because they've been there. A lot of the French players, if we look back in when they won the last World Cup,
Yeah.
pretty much there's not really that much difference. So you've got Varane is there, is well experienced. You've got a goalkeeper is there, also he's a well experienced player. But I believe a lot of these Moroccan players will take a lot of experience from this game going on to the next World Cup. I believe they've got a chance to actually progress on forward.
Now, let's talk a bit about some of the teams that were unable to get as far as Morocco, Senegal. We talk about Ghana, for instance. We talk about Cameroon. I mean, you can tell look, Morocco is far apart. I mean, a lot of the times it's the West African countries that seem to be going, the right way, seems to be pushing the barriers. But this time, am I right in saying that there's a paradigm shift?
Not necessarily, because I believe that when we look at teams like Cameroon, Senegal, and even also Ghana, I believe that they have the quality also to push forward. But I believe what was lacking was that they didn't really play as united as possible. Whereas the difference with Morocco, they was playing as Morocco knew this what strength to hit the team on in a different way. So I believe next World Cup, if every African national team can approach it in a different way, based on the players that they have, we can definitely go far.
And you're tipping. Some people are tipping Morocco to even to dominate, the international scene, particularly in Africa. You see them doing that. You think they'll be able to sustain that?
We hope so, but I believe that there will be other teams also that will take inspiration from what Morocco have done into their national team.
Now, with football and as a coach yourself, everyone has their philosophy, their identity. A lot of the times, people think that African football is just about kick, head, run, smash, the raw talent. I'd like to hear your take on that. It's time for a quick break. This is Talk Africa on Channel 7. We're taking a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more.
Leatherback helps you move your money securely from one country to another with ease. With over 20 currencies to choose from, including Indian rupee, naira, Ghanaian cedi, and US dollar, with Leatherback you can move money anytime, anywhere. Simply sign up, verify your identity, and you're ready to add money to your account. Leatherback is licensed in 4 countries, and with full visibility of your cash flow via our dashboard, you're in control. One access, one platform, one world. Download the Leatherback app and let the journey begin.
I am so hungry. This I want to do.
Whether you're looking for poundo in your crayfish stock, all-purpose seasoning, or any other ingredient, Tropical Salt has everything you need.
No. A strong young man. And hero.
Mommy, the real hero.
Tropical Salt flavors of the world to your table.
Talk Africa.
Welcome back to the program. This is Talk Africa with me, Jones Ewua. If you're tuning in, we'd like to hear from you. You can head over to our Facebook page, the Channel 7 Facebook page, and get involved in the discussion we're having here. Okay, plenty to discuss, right? Unfortunately, Morocco could not progress, but they're still in the tournament. They'll be playing against Croatia, hopefully, for the third spot. And hopefully they can do that because I think Morocco have been fantastic. They've surprised a lot of people. Now, before we went on the break, I was asking Majid here with regards to the perception about African football, particularly when you watch the African Cup of Nations, the commentary, the way that a lot of the Western commentary seems to be negative. And I just wanted to know perhaps if you feel as though because of this performance from Morocco, that would change, or this is the true identity of African football, because we spoke about this before, and I was asking you, every football team has their philosophy, right? And from what I know, we know what African teams are capable of doing. It's just the moment that everybody realizes what is actually in the continent and what can be produced.
Absolutely right. I think at this particular time now, what a lot of the nation can take on from what Morocco has done is that they can now see that there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of talent within the nation of Africa. And I believe that if they can bring the right people and really train these young players that we have, definitely the whole national team can definitely go far.
Now, as a coach, let's talk let's be a bit more practical in what we're discussing here. I remember the likes of Didier Drogba. Didier Drogba once said if he had the type of coaching at a very young age, which a lot of these Premier League players experience, he would have probably gone beyond what he was able to achieve. You tend to find out that a lot of these African players are just raw. And the talent is not nurtured at a very young age. You think that could be a factor as well?
Absolutely, Jones. I believe that's also one of the factors, because if the African nations can really come together and invest in the infrastructure of the teams and actually put into place things that can develop the young players, I believe that a lot of these players can actually progress and actually go on to do well for their countries. What Drogba actually mentioned is right, because we tend to get a lot of the African players going into Europe to develop. But if we can invest into our countries, we can definitely get best out of our own players.
It's not the problem, though, because if you look at England right now, England as a team has an identity. Right, the way in which they play. And a lot of these players have been playing since under 16, under 19s, and they've come all the way through to the national team. I think what you're saying is a factor as well, because a lot of the times we depend on players outside. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but do you think it's time that a lot of investment is gone into the grassroots, particularly back home, because a lot of the players are playing outside anyway. And what I'm trying to get at is to have an identity needs to begin from the grassroots.
Absolutely.
When they're young. Not when, from what I've been told, once you pass the age of 22, 24, you can't be trained. You can't train such a person or coach because you're already set in your ways.
No, absolutely. I believe what you're trying to say is that the foundation needs to start early. And I believe that is totally right, because if we can get the foundation right from the young age, I believe that will set them up into the right path. For example, we see in England here, there's a lot of fundings, there's a lot of grants that goes on into the non-roots clubs. if the same philosophies can be added into the African teams, I believe that will help them a lot. I believe we'll develop a lot of players.
Let's talk about France a little bit because we've spoken about Morocco, and of course the theme is about Morocco, so we'll carry on talking about Morocco. But let's talk a bit about France. France shocked you in any way? Did you expect them to, walk all over Morocco? Because that was the perception from a lot of the
Absolutely.
pundits.
I mean, France shocked me a lot, to be honest, because they have not really been playing well, but however, they've been managing to win games, which obviously, as we know in football, that's the most important thing, results. But their performance has not been convincing because Morocco, for me, they dominated the game. However, France, they've got a way in which they know how to win the games, even though they're not playing well. We saw, for example, against the likes when they play against England. They did not perform well, but they were able to beat England based on just pure experience and just having that edge over their opponents. But I believe against Argentina will be a different game.
And let's talk about Argentina. A lot of football fans would love for Messi to finally get his hand on the World Trophy. Let me tell you something, right? Now, some people might think I'm crazy with what I'm about to say here. The discussion about Ronaldo, Messi, who's the greatest football player of all time. I mean, I like to think as myself as being a bit old-fashioned. So for me, Pele, right? Maradona. Of course, you have Zico, Baba. I mean, the Brazilian squad. But R9, to me, is the greatest of all time. The reason why I say that is because not only did he make his name across Europe, he also won the World Cup. And I think as, to be considered the best player to ever have done it, you need to get your hands on the World Cup. And it looks as if this might happen to Messi.
I mean, let's wait and see on Sunday. I believe that will also be that for me, it will be an important trophy for Messi to win because he has pretty much won every trophy. But I believe if he can win that World Cup, it will be a very good way to actually finish his career. But I believe for both of them, Messi, Ronaldo, we should embrace them. We should actually learn from them because two of them have been the best players. And despite even if one win the World Cup or one have not won the World Cup, they're all fantastic players to watch and also to learn from.
Now, let's talk about the finals, okay? Looking at Argentina, I mean, they've not been firing on all cylinders. The way that Argentina played. Neither have France. So going into this game, you've got one world-class player in Argentina, which is Messi. And then you've also got Mbappe.
That's right.
So you've got one exiting and one looking to take the mantle. Your thoughts?
It will be an interesting game. It will be a game where I believe Argentina just might have a bit more edge on top of France because based on the fact that so far their performances have been very strong. They've looked as a team. And also defensively, they may all have their weakness, but I believe going forward, the likes of Alvarez, for example, the one playing at Man City, he's also a threat. The likes of Di Maria is still in good form. Messi, we can see he's still performing. Whereby France, they tend to rely a lot more on Mbappe and Giroud, and possibly Griezmann as well. But take these three players away, they don't really have that much creativity or something that they can use to take them forward. So I believe it will be an interesting game that could be won tactically as well, based on who really wants it more on that day.
And speaking about tactics, I mean, how do you approach this game? It's the finals. Did you sit back and try to catch your opponent on a counter, or do you just go and play your game? Because clearly I know that Argentinians will probably double up on Mbappe, the same as the French doubling up on Messi.
I believe so, yes, but I also think it's a game where they just need to approach it as any other game, but really with the intensity as they did with the previous match where they played against Croatia, where the intensity Croatia couldn't have matched them and their creativity in terms of going forward. So I believe if they can apply the same way with France, I believe it will be a total different game.
Let's talk about Mbappe for a minute here. Very promising. He's set to take the world by storm, and hopefully, if he gets his hands on this again, then Ronaldo exiting, Messi exiting, Mbappe is the one. So far, Mbappe, have you been impressed by his performance so far?
I mean, I've been very impressed with his performance. Like everyone watching the World Cup, they've been amazed by his speed, by his power, by his change of directions. I mean, he's a fantastic player to watch. I believe he has a great future ahead of him if he can just learn from the greats, because I believe Messi, he can learn a lot from Messi. For example, we see when young Neymar went to Barcelona, he learned a lot from Messi. So if Mbappe can have that willingness to learn from him, not to see him as a competition, will help him to progress in his career. Because what we tend to see from these young players is that they tend to find the senior players a lot more as a competition. But if he can learn from Messi and take on what is good from him, I believe he will have a long career in the game.
Now, this French team, the defending champions, of course, if France wins the World Cup again, then I think they will match the Brazilian team that did it in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
And a lot has been said about this particular French team, because some were saying that this team is actually weak. No Pogba, no Benzema, and these are pivotal players in the team. But they've gone on to surprise everybody.
I mean, absolutely right. The team, for me personally, they're not the strongest, but I believe what is making them stand out is that every players that have come on, they also playing to make history for themselves. For example, the likes of the new players. They've came on, they know their role, they know their job, they know what they need to do, and they're also doing that to their best of ability. So I believe that it's something that all the nations also can actually apply, because you can have players that could be missing. For example, the French team had Benzema, for example, he wasn't there, but Giroud stepped up. He's taking the lead. Pogba is not there, but a young midfielder from Real Madrid, he's improving every day. He's delivering strong performances. So if every nations can apply the same thing, I believe will help them a lot.
Now, I just quickly want to come back to Morocco because, in case you just tuned in, yes, we are talking about Morocco, but I wasn't talking about the World Cup here. Morocco was able to go far. And in as much as every time we talk about the World Cup, we're talking about representation among African teams that participate in the World Cup. And this is what I tend to do. I tend to judge how far a lot of, particularly the African teams are away from, the European teams or the South American teams. How do you see it? Are we getting closer, or the gap just keeps widening?
I think that's a good question, Jones. I think we're actually getting closer. Why would I say that? Because I believe now there's been a lot of coaches, European coaches, that are going back into the Africa to actually develop the players. We've seen the likes of Ghana, for example, appoint the likes of Chris Hughton as a technical director. I believe with his wealth of knowledge and experience, that could only benefit Ghana. So if the other nations can also apply the same thing, that will only close the gap between the Europeans and the Africans teams also, if we can apply in the same way. Because I believe, like we said earlier on, there's so much more potential in Africa. If we can just invest and bring the right coaches that really knows how to develop these players, we can definitely close that gap.
Okay, now speaking of closing gaps, Switching from football to strikes, not strikers, strikes. We'll come back to the football. Now, nurses in England have been tasking the government to up their pay. According to nurses, salaries have stagnated, but inflation has risen, and the government have not decided to match inflation with their salary. And as such, they want to go on strike. Earlier today, I caught up with some of the nurses who have taken to the street to demonstrate, to air their views. Let's take a quick listen to this, and we'll come back. We can
What we're asking for is an inflation-busting pay rise. This is after years and years of sub-inflation pay rises and pay freezes and 1% pay increases for NHS workers. And we can't afford it. We can afford it because a 10% pay increase for NHS workers or a 10% increase in the pay pot for NHS workers would only cost the Treasury £0.66 billion because of the receipts the government would get in tax receipts, and also because NHS workers put their money back into community, which improves our economic activity in all of our communities. So we believe it is worthwhile, and NHS workers and other public sector workers deserve a decent pay rise and shouldn't have to pay for a cost of living crisis.
What about the timing of these industrial actions and the implication on patients and the vulnerable?
Well, that's surely the government's making, because we've said time and time again as trade unions that we're willing to sit down and speak with the minister, the health secretary, and speak to them meaningfully about pay. But the health secretary refuses to speak to trade unions and their representatives and our workers about pay. So these strikes could be called off any time as long as there was willingness to negotiate with workers' representatives and trade unions, like they've done in Scotland, for example, where they have come to an agreement regarding pay.
Now, you've just spoken about Scotland, but if you compare what the nurses in Scotland agreed to that what the nurses are asking, demanding from the government here, difference, isn't there? In the end, the nurses in Scotland agreed to 5%, whereas nurses here are demanding 19%.
Well, that's part of a negotiation, isn't it? If we sit down and we have the negotiations, you've got to look at what the details are of that Scottish Deal, which was just more than pay. There was lots of other elements to that, like looking at people's working hours, looking at reviewing the grading and banding system in the NHS, and looking at welfare and well-being facilities. So there's lots to talk about, but they've got to a meaningful agreement. That's why pay in Scotland for NHS workers is higher than what it is in England.
Earlier, you mentioned that you met the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay. What was the mood like when you had a meeting with him?
It was a congenial, cordial meeting. We exchanged our views as trade unions with Mr. Barclay, and he told us what his priorities are. But we didn't talk about the main issue, I'm afraid, which is what the government were going to do to address NHS pay now for NHS workers. We're in the midst of the 133,000 vacancies, and also lots of NHS workers using food banks and suffering because of the cost of living crisis. Unfortunately, we didn't get down to the main issue, really, but we are willing to talk to him and the other Department of Health officials and people in NHS England and NHS employers to talk about pay. It doesn't have to be exclusively the minister, but he has to sanction those discussions.
And of course, in the midst of all of this, it is the patients who suffer. What would you say to the vulnerables and patients who feel the repercussions of this industrial action?
Well, Unite aren't taking industrial action today. Unite proposed to take industrial action on Wednesday, the 21st of December, for our ambulance services in the North East, North West and West Midlands. Obviously, we regret any disruption that is caused for patients, and we don't want it to happen. But on the other hand, we are putting plans in place that the people who are going to be most in need will be looked after. So we hope there will be enough facilities and resources for people to be looked after who really need it. So we regret any distress that does occur, any disruption that does occur, but we hope there will be measures in place to actually sustain those services.
Clearly, the government not budging, and the union not budging. So what would you deem as acceptable to be able to bring about some resolution to this industrial action?
Well, we've got to get around the table and talk about that, and that's not something that we can go into now. We can't conduct negotiations on the broadcast media, but we just want to have those talks. That's our main priority, to have those talks now, so we can get into a place where we can come up with a acceptable solution for NHS workers regarding their pay for this year, and to address the needs of the NHS. Because if we don't have proper pay for NHS workers, we don't have the staff, and without the staff, we don't have the service that patients and the public need.
And finally, we all know the economic challenges that we're all facing, and which the government has said it has made it difficult for them to meet your demands.
It's a difficulty of the government's own making. We all saw the budget, the autumn budget, back in September. And, you know, they've not, over the last 12 years, invested in public services. So we've had the resilience to cope with the pandemic, for example. So these are chickens coming home to roost after 12 years of Conservative government. And also, working people shouldn't have to pay this crisis. If you look at the Sunday Times Rich List, which came out in April, their wealth increased by over 10% in one single year. There's more billionaires than ever before in this country. So the media, government and others trying to blame working people just trying to get a fair pay increase for the economic woes of the country is indeed misrepresenting what's actually going on. You know, there's enough in this economy for everyone, so we can all suffer. And trying to say that NHS workers going on strike is helping Vladimir Putin is just ridiculous, really. I don't know where they're coming from. It's actually people like these workers on strike today, like our members who will be going on strike next week, that have actually been the bulwark against Vladimir Putin and actually supporting Ukrainians and supporting all sorts of people who are trying to make sure there's a free Ukraine. So I don't know where the government's coming from, but they're really having a low blow at working people here.
Do you think the nurses are justified to take this industrial action?
I think they have a just cause. And this government has absolutely trashed the economy. It's trashed the NHS. It's trashed our social services. And it's time that somebody stood up and said, we've had enough. And I support the rail strikes as well. Listen, there's never a good time to strike. Of course there isn't. But I think what the Royal College of Nursing and these nurses felt was enough is enough. And at some point you just have to say, you know, we're not taking any more. And we've got the Houses of Parliament in the background. And let's face it, the government is making it out to be the nurses' fault that Putin is winning the war, and all that is absolute garbage. They are blaming everybody but themselves.
And what do you make of the government's decision on not being able to afford what the nurses are demanding?
I think that's complete nonsense. Of course they can afford it. The government can print money. It is not about an economic crisis, although if there is one, then it's clearly the government's fault for tanking the economy and doing such stupid things and losing billions of our pounds on the stock market, and to their friend, of course, with all the PPE scandals. So I would say there is always a good time for a pay rise for nurses who actually keep us well and keep us, you know, engaged in society.
About pay and making sure that we save our NHS. This isn't just about pay. It's about safety our entire NHS. It's absolutely unconsidered. Okay, you see.
Welcome back. Now it's imperative that we keep you up to date as to what is happening. And this is what the show is all about. We'll keep a close eye on this, and any more developments, of course, we bring it to you. Now then, continue to share. If you're watching us on Facebook, let us know where you're watching the program from. Also, send in your comments and I will read them out, particularly to deal with what we're talking about here. You can watch the show live on Facebook, on my Channel 7 Facebook page, also on Sky Channel 181 if you're not doing so. Or you can download the Channel 7 app and take us along wherever you're going. We've also got you covered. If you're the visual person, like to listen on radio, you can listen to the show on GN Radio. Now, back to football. I think it was during probably the early stages of the tournament where we were talking about the fact that all the African teams had African managers. And this has always been the bone of contention. Do you go for a foreign coach or a homegrown coach? And clearly this is a testament that not only can African coaches get the teams forward, but can also create that quote unquote that identity, that philosophy when it comes to football?
I believe it's important to give also chances to our own managers. I believe that it's important for them to also have their own philosophy in the game. Instead of bringing a European coach, for example, I believe also the African coach can do the same job as the European coaches. If they can only have the support, I believe that this coach will do actually much more than the European coaches, because number one, they know the players, they know what the players need, and they know how to get the best from those players because they can relate to them. For example, some of those coaches have been through the same issues or the same struggles that these players have been to. So they know how to relate to them instead of the European coaches. So I believe giving them the opportunities will allow them to actually progress and advance the national teams of Africans forward.
How important is that? Because I just want you to just touch, expand a bit more on what you're saying. In football, language barrier is a big thing.
Absolutely.
Right? And we've had some managers where they keep saying that, when it comes to players, some players, they cannot identify or be able to communicate with the team. So it's important, right?
Absolutely, it's very, very, very important because I believe that communication is key. Communication is very important in any field of life. And also as a coach, it's important for you to communicate with your players. And if you cannot speak the language that they understand, how would you be able to pass on your message to them?
Well, there is a language that I do understand, which is when the director tells me we got to go, that means we need to go. Maju, thank you very much for coming today to talk about this. And of course, to you, the viewer at home, thank you very much for staying tuned. Make sure you join us, same place, same time next week. Until then, it's goodbye from us.